the Sony A7RV will be better than the Sony Alpha 1. I know that's crazy talk, and that's something I probably wouldn't have believed just a couple short weeks ago. So, what's different after watching what may be some inside perspective of a couple different YouTubers, now I don't think that statement is so crazy anymore. Let's talk about that. I have a lot of experience with the A7R4 and later the A1 as my main stills bodies, shooting interiors over the past few years. Even though the A7R4 is older and in my daily loadout was replaced by the A1, I still think it's a fantastic camera, and it has a lot going for it as it's currently Sony's highest resolution body and also allegedly has the most dynamic range. But the A7R4's Achilles heel is it is a bear to work with. You see, the A7R4 is a 61 megapixel camera, and what that means is the raw files are like 120 megabytes apiece. Add to that, even though it is the A7R4, it's not much different than the A7R3. And by that, I mean the way that you work with it, especially when tethering wirelessly to an iPad, which is what I do. Just like all the Generation 3 cameras, it has an absolutely horrible range while wirelessly tethering, and the camera down converting those 120 megabyte uncompressed RAWs even to small JPEGs for you to then preview the image on an iPad takes a long time. Also pertaining to that throughput is the weakness of the Wi-Fi radio on board the A7R4, because the further you go from the camera, the longer it takes to transmit those giant files to your iPad. So a couple of years ago now, gosh, I guess it's been a couple of years, when the Sony Alpha 1 was announced, I went ahead and bought one because I knew that this was Sony's latest, greatest sports camera, and one thing that sports cameras have always been better than everything else at is transmitting images. Coming from the impressively sluggish A7R4, I was ready for a change. And I was right. The A1 is way better at that. The Sony Alpha 1, even though it is slightly less resolution than the A7R4, has that newer CF Express Type A card architecture on board, and it has a much, much stronger Wi-Fi radio. The files are still about 100 megabytes apiece, but those other things, along with the 50 megapixel stacked sensor, means that the A1 is a world faster than the A7R4, just in daily workflow. So I wanted to lay the groundwork with my experience with these two cameras, because now we're going to go fast forward to just a couple weeks ago when the rumors of the upcoming Sony A7R5 started to materialize. Probably the most significant person outside of Sony that is giving us information is a gentleman by the name of Andrea Pizzini. Andrea is the guy who headed up Sony Alpha rumors for several years. He still does, I guess. In fairness, I don't think Andrea's information is typically all that correct until we get very close to an announcement. That's how it's been in the past anyway. However, according to Andrea, we're going to be getting it later this month. Sony will be announcing the A7R5. A couple days ago, Andrea made a video about the specifications of the A7R5. Now, one thing that he really stressed kind of throughout the video was that the A7R5 has a new AI deep learning type of autofocus system that has never been seen before, really, on a Sony camera anyway. In fact, he made such a big deal about this, going on and on about it, it's like he knows something that we don't. It certainly seems like this could be a better focusing system than the one that Sony currently has in their current flagship, the Alpha 1. We can also reasonably deduce from Andrea's spec sheet of the A7R5 that it's either going to have a stacked 61 megapixel sensor like the R4, well, 61 megapixels like the R4 but stacked, or at the very least have on board what he says is a brand new Bion's XR2, whatever it is, processor. We can also assume, just from all of the Sony full-frame camera bodies in the past year or two, that the CF Express Type A card architecture will be on board, and it will also have a much stronger Wi-Fi radio than the old A7R4. That last part's pretty important for throughput, and I'm sure about that because I also have the A7 IV, which does have a better Wi-Fi connection and longer range and faster throughput than the A7R4, regardless of the lighter file sizes. It's just a faster camera with a stronger range. It behaves a lot like the A1 in that regard. So why am I boldly saying that the A7R5 is going to be in many ways superior to the Alpha 1? Well, let's take it step by step, okay? According to Andrea, who is an insider, it will have a new exotic focusing system, perhaps that the A1 never will. We also know that it will be higher resolution than A1. That's a given, right? It's an R body. We also know that it has a processor that is newer and therefore most likely faster than A1, maybe enabling this new focusing system that we're talking about. And we also know that it has the CF Express Type A architecture on board because that's just what Sony's doing. So even if the sensor is not stacked, there's a whole lot to like about the A7R5 versus the Alpha 1. So what then would inspire somebody to buy an Alpha 1, a now 2-year-old camera over an A7R5 with all these things on board? Well, this is where we get into our other YouTuber, and his name is Josh Satin. Sorry, Josh, if I mispronounced your name. I've been a subscriber on Josh's channel for a couple of years. He just seems like a really nice guy. Josh just a few days ago published, I guess it's about a week ago or so, published a video that basically said there's a sale on Alpha 1 cameras through B&H if you're a social media influencer for $3,180. That's a crazy number. It's a crazy percentage off of what, for everybody else, is a $6,500 retail price on the Alpha 1. Now, what's funny about this is it was only up for a short time and he pulled that video down. And I'm not sure why, because he hasn't explained why. But when I went to, and I'm thinking about doing this video that I'm doing, when I went to find that video, I couldn't find it, but I was sure that I saw it. So I decided to do a Google search on it. And sure enough, there are a few forums where other people saw it as well. And one of them is Fred Miranda Forum. I can't believe they're still around. But other people saw it too. And so this very well could be a very real thing. Josh's video that he's since taken down, he showed actually the B&H page that showed it was $3,180 for social media influencers. I have no idea how to get on board being categorized as that. And I'm not really looking to buy another A1 anyway. But it's very interesting that this is kind of coming to a head the same time that the A7R5 could be coming down the pike. Here's one more thing. One more piece to the puzzle that I think is really going to bring this home, and that is rumors of an Alpha 1 Mark II. For this, we're going to go back to Andrea Pizzini in his A7R5 video where he was describing the leaked specs of it. Toward the end of the video, he made just an offhand comment about some other exciting things coming down the pike from Sony, including this screenshot, which shows a rendering of an Alpha 1 Mark II, along with a teaser that it will be announced in the next quarter or so. I do think the A7R5, according to all of this information, has a very good chance of being a largely better camera than the current Alpha 1. I think Sony knows this too, which is why they're potentially dumping stock of the current Alpha 1, whether it be to influencer or what, and why they have an Alpha 1 Mark II potentially on the very near horizon. It's almost like they know a little bit about a certain Canon R1 and are looking to beat them to the punch again. But let me know what you think. To me, this is pretty convincing evidence that Sony's about to drop the gauntlet here over the next few months, and that's exciting. It's competition like this and advances like this are really good for all of us. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you.